Okay, hello and welcome to another Clare Echo video special. We're delighted to be joined today by Fergal Hegarty, two-time All-Ireland winner with Clare, and one of the county's most experienced sports journalists, Seamus Hayes. Gentlemen, thanks very much for joining us. And we begin, I suppose, unfortunately, we'd hope these video specials would have been going on for a bit longer, looking at the Clare Hurlers championship campaign, but we begin, I suppose, by paying tribute to CellNet, who sponsored us and ensured the Wi-Fi connection has been up to scratch. So continued thanks to them for their coverage with the Clare Echo. So Fergal, I'll just turn to yourself to start. Obviously 2-point defeat for Clare, but it could easily have been victory in the dying stages. What for you, did it come down to Cork being that bit more clinical, or what was the difference between the teams?
Yeah, I suppose they did create more goal chances. I think, probably 7 clear-cut goal chances I can recall. We created maybe 3. So I suppose they did create. They seemed to open up our defence that bit easier. But having said that, I suppose when Dermot Ryan put us a pint up, all the momentum seemed to be with us, and you felt we were the likely team at that stage. But for an inexperienced enough Cork team, they have a lot of newcomers. I suppose they did show a lot of resolve, and they were cool under pressure at that stage. And look, we could have snatched it at the end. And I don't think, people said we could have stolen. I don't think it would have been a steal necessarily, because I think, we were right there with them for all the game, and I don't think we probably deserved to be 5 points down at that stage. But I suppose on another day the goal would have gone in, but that's the luck of the draw. I don't think we got the breaks maybe as much as we had been getting. I thought, a couple of, even Cooney's chance was blocked, and then we could have got a 65 out of it, and it ricocheted back off his leg and out for a wide ball. That was, instead of getting a goal, we could have got a pint. We ended up nothing. So, I suppose those are the breaks. They got a goal before a half time. There was a certain amount of fortune in it as well. So, I suppose, but all in all, a really good display by Clare, gutsy display, and I suppose it kind of just it was a follow-on from the latter stages of the league and the championship. We were showed real desire, real resolve, and from a supporter's point of view, you couldn't ask for any more.
And Seamus, for yourself, what was the difference ultimately, or what do you think it came down to?
Yeah, well, I agree with Fergal. It could have gone either way. A few small things, the hop of the ball, a few things just didn't bounce right for Clare. And I suppose, Gary Cooney's effort there, as they said, it could have been a 65. Once the block was put in. And in fairness to Tony Kelly, I suppose everybody was excited and nearly preparing for next week when they saw him with possession racing through. But you'd have to give a certain amount of credit to Patrick Collins as well. I thought he spread himself very well in the goal, to make the block. Overall, I just felt that the Cork forward line was a bit more evenly balanced maybe than the Clare forward line, that more players in the Cork attack offered a greater threat. Overall, Clare were dependent hugely on Tony, and who has delivered all year. He's been absolutely phenomenal, and there's no question about. But he is a hurler of the year candidate once again. With Cork, they seem to have that little bit of pace, and a couple of new players that they have found this year. The Jack O'Connor and these fellas who have come in have given them a few greater options. And then you have the experience of Harnedy and Patrick Horgan there in the middle of it. So I thought they were just that bit, maybe offered more of a threat up front than Clare did as a unit. And maybe that just kind of swung it marginally in Cork's favour in my eyes. But, you'd have to be, as Fergal said, as a Clare follower, you'd have to be happy with the year, given the disappointment at the start of the season when we lost the opening 2 league games and people were kind of writing off Clare and saying they were gone. And they improved significantly with each game from then onwards, and you'd have to give huge credit to Brian Lohan's backroom team for doing that and for getting them to where they finished up last Saturday. And okay, the season is over, unfortunately, but they can hold their heads high. They have made a lot of progress.
And Fergal, very fine margins, I suppose. It was the one player you wanted the ball to go to when it got to Tony Kelly. And had Clare got over the line, had that went in, you'd maybe have been confident to possibly get over Dublin and get to semi-final. But was the factor maybe that Cork were probably a level above any of the opposition Clare had played to date in the championship?
Yeah, I suppose Tipperary would be up there with them, but we were kind of denied a real game that day with sending off. But I guess Wexford would be a level but with all due respect to them, would be a level below Cork. And I think Waterford were missing quite a number of key players the first day we played them. So I suppose it was always going to be the toughest game. As you said, Tony Kelly had the ball, and he got into great space. When he got the ball, he had a lot to do. And Cork knew what they had to do at that stage was just block up that area. But his pace brought him away, a huge burst of pace, and no one could stay with him. And probably hit it too well in the end. The shot was a really good shot. And this was sometimes if you miss-hit them or hit them, a bit lower, it's easy talk. Tony was, after putting in a huge shift, after catching a great ball, to win the penalty. Perhaps I suppose our full forward line, didn't probably offer the same threat as what the Cork. I think to agree with Seamus there, Jack O'Connor was a threat every time he got the ball. I think our full forward line, I suppose that we weren't maybe as competitive as we should have been in there. We didn't offer as much of a threat, certainly for a goal anyway. Maybe we could have moved Tony in a bit sooner, but he was doing so well out the field. This was that you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, and I think I suppose John Lowe summed it up last night when he meant he's one of the greatest players we've ever seen, and he quoted the great Christy Ring, and he was thinking of players like him and Joe Canning. So huge praise from the likes of from Don Lowe Cusick. So some of the points he got were unbelievable. Aidan McCarthy got a few good scores. I suppose we were guilty of a few wides, maybe shooting a bit unsighted at times when we could have worked the ball into a better position. Albeit Cork, missed a few chances as well, and they missed the goal chances sometimes from good defending from our guys. I suppose ironically, I thought Seamus Hayes, while he was involved in a lot of play, his confidence seemed to be ebbing away from him. And I think the last ball where the goal came, he would have tapped that over ordinarily. He gave a poor enough pass inside. Barrett had to do a lot to control the ball, and it ended up burying it very well. But ironically, I think it was because Hegarty was running out of confidence at that stage. And again, that go back to my point about the rub of the green and the breaks. I think that kind of epitomises it there.
Okay. And I suppose mentioning Shane Barrett there, Fergal, like Seamus, to look at the impact from the Cork bench between Shane Barrett and Connolly, they got 1-2, whereas Shane Golden was the only contributor to the scoreboard from Clare's subs, and he got a point. So was that did Brian Lohan knock it enough from the lads he brought in, do you think, to make a difference?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. In terms of adding to the scoreline, he certainly didn't. But I suppose we mentioned it earlier. The loss of Shane O'Donnell, was massive, and I think there's only when you reflect on the game, and I've watched it a couple of times since. His loss was incalculable, really, because as Fergal said earlier, it would have forced one or two Cork defenders to keep an extra eye on him, and to have given maybe a bit more space to Tony Kelly or David Reilly or one or two of the others, to come into the game. And that was, a big blow to Clare for this championship, to be without Shane O'Donnell, a fella of his class and a fella of his talent. And that was a massive blow. And I suppose we certainly didn't get the same impact off the bench as Cork did. And that would have been a contributory factor, to the result.
And Fergal, I suppose maybe looking at some of the matchups, like Colm Galvin was put to wing forward, maybe to quieten Mark Coleman more so than to get Colm into the game, and you had Tim O'Mahony and David Reilly seemed to nearly cancel each other out. Was there any matchups you think that either Kieran Kingston got right or Brian Lohan got right that was significant to the result?
Yeah, well, I suppose if you look at Patrick Horgan's contribution, it was 2 points from play. I think that matchup Clare got very much right. I thought Conor Cleary had an outstanding game. I suppose Rory Hayes struggled at times with Jack O'Connor, but I don't think we had another player as equipped to do the job as well as Rory did. And he did okay at times, but he had phenomenal pace. And I think that's one thing that Cork have going for them, is that real pace up front. I suppose some of our players, maybe the 3 or 4 games in quick succession, and particularly was very hot again on Saturday. And I thought some of the players that showed huge energy in the earlier games probably weren't at it as much as they could have been. I thought Ryan Taylor had one of his quieter afternoons, tried extremely hard, but just found it hard to get into the game. Colin Malone, got 3 great points, but again, I thought found it difficult. Diarmuid Ryan found it difficult to get into the game. But I think that the bench was crucial because it was so hot, and we needed guys in maybe a bit earlier than today. I thought Mark Rogers should feel a little bit unlucky to be taken off. I thought he made a great run through for that pass to Shanahan, and I thought he was dangerous if he got one or two chances, he would have punished. But look at this, was these guys, the stats are telling them otherwise and whatnot, and they decided to go with him. I think bar Shane Golden, we didn't get that impact from the bench. But in terms of matchups, it was Corkfield. O'Leary did a reasonable good job, and Tony Kelly, I wouldn't, and Sean or John Logue tried to say that last night. I didn't think he did a brilliant job on him. I thought Tony, had an exceptional game again. But overall, I think we got our match. In terms of Patrick Horgan, if you said you'd keep Patrick Horgan to 2 points, you'd be very happy. You'd say you'd have a lot to it, because he has been torn in Clare's sides come back to 2013. So Clare got that very much right. And, I thought Cleary had a really good year, very solid in all the games.
And Fergal, from what you've seen of him maybe at matches this year, could you just, red helmet aside, Brian Lohan as a player versus Brian Lohan as a manager, what's the key differences?
But I think the big thing is there isn't a whole lot of difference, because he has brought that kind of, that manliness and that doggedness, determination, spirit as a player. I think, probably the greatest fullback that ever played the game in my eyes anyway. And you can see that, he's got a great tune out of that team. I think he couldn't have asked any more in terms of effort. And that's all you want as a supporter or as a manager, to get the most and that they're out of the team. And they're playing, I suppose they're reflecting that kind of never say die attitude that Brian had. Clare teams in the last couple of years, 5 points down, going into injury time, most teams just see it out then. But Clare kept going right to the end, and brilliant catch by Kelly for the goal. But overall, I think Brian Lohan has done a fantastic job. We all know there's been a lot of challenges there on and off the field, a lot of sideshows, and I think he's behaved impeccably. I mean, when he's interviewed, he just shows class. He's been tried to be drawn into sideshows. He doesn't go there. He's constantly backs his players, and you can see they're playing for it. That's the big thing. And I suppose the big thing for me is that the county board now moved to secure Brian for at least another year, or however long he wants to stay. Brian is a young family as well, and he's a lot of other interests going on in his life. But if they could secure Brian for at least another year, I think it's important then, to keep that group together and hopefully get Shane O'Donnell back. If we get Peter Duggan back from Australia, and make it attractive for guys to play with Clare. Obviously people like to tour the world now and travel, but make it so attractive for them. Look after them whatever way they need to be looked after. Shannon is in the road, Limerick is in the road. There shouldn't be any problem with employment for these lads, etc. Keep them local, and I think it was a big loss with Duggan going to Australia for so long. And even if we get him back now, we don't know what kind of a player he's going to be. But try and avoid that. We don't have the pick of players in Clare. And even going forward, if you look at Malone and Cleary, 2 West Clare guys, if we could tap into that pool of players back there as well in whatever way going forward for the betterment of Clare hurling, they are there. We're a very small county when we're picked from half the county. Look at our options there as well, and I know that's for another day. But in the immediate future, Brian Lohan is the man to lead this team.
And Seamus, like we saw there, to find a whistle in the Gaelic grounds, Clare defeated but put in a savage effort. But we had supporters on their feet cheering Clare, run down towards the tunnel as they were going in, just to show their support. So would you say Brian Lohan has brought a spirit back to Clare hurling that was possibly missing?
He certainly has brought a great spirit to Clare. The game, he brought a great spirit to Clare hurling. He's a man that plays to win all the time. He plays from his heart, as well as having had the skill at the skill level. And as Fergal said, he was such an outstanding fullback. And there's no doubt in the world about that. And going forward, like there have been so many sideshows in the last 2 or 3 years in Clare GA, and mostly, in my opinion, caused by a relatively small group of people who seem to be kind of, if you like, trying to drive the ship. And they're not helping any side. They're not helping Brian Lohan, because he's enough to do to prepare a team and to focus on the team, and rather than be dragged into these issues. And I think that's something that has to be sorted out. And I think that some of the people who have been involved, should know better, and they should think of the greater good of the whole Clare scene, and let whoever is in managing a team or involved in the management of a team or training a team, let them do their job. Something that they don't want to be involved in, and let them focus on their job. I think that needs to be sorted out. And there are a few individuals who have been very prominent in this thing, and they just need to look at the overall good of Clare hurling and look where Clare hurling is going. And we haven't had the same side shows in football, and football has made big strides at intercounty level from a Clare point of view, and hopefully that the same thing can now happen in relation to the hurling going forward, and that things will be that there'll be less, let's say, less issues in the coming year.
And Seamus, Fergal mentioned it there about Brian, getting the option of a third year. Would you be confident he will be given that option of a third year?
I have no doubt that he'll be given the option of a third year, obviously, and I think Fergal touched on it there as well. It's a hugely demanding job managing an inter-county team in any county. It's a hugely demanding job, and Brian is a professional guy in relation to work. He's a young family, so he'll have to weigh up all that end of it as well. But there's no doubt about his passion for Clare and his passion for Clare hurling, and I think his family have shown that over the years. Like his father Gus showed that when he was in his playing days. Frank showed it, his brother, So from that point of view, but I think that that Brian is to be given time as well to look at his options and where he going. And if Brian says, "Look, I'm prepared to do another year," I don't see any issue with that. I think that that'll happen, assuming that's my reading of it anyway, assuming that he says he wants to do it. But I think that for his sake as well as everybody else's sake, the people who have been shouting about this and about that, that they need to take a step back as well. We saw some of the things last week that certain officials in Clare J were accused of smiling when Clare were beaten in some game. That kind of rubbish has to stop as well. People have to focus on what's important. What's important is the improvement of Clare hurling, and the improvement of Clare hurling at all is to sort out the coaching of our younger players and getting our development squads back up to maybe where they were 9 or 10 years ago in terms of a coaching program and a development program. And it's all part of the future going forward. And those are the issues that have to be looked at, and those are the issues I think that people have to focus on.
And Fergal, and the wider picture, mentioning Jack Connor, he probably wouldn't have been out of place with the Irish sprinters over in the Olympics, but you look at the young players Cork had, to be able to bring in Shane Barrett, like Kieran Kingston was going on about their youth after the match. But in terms of Clare, the wider picture, what position do you think Clare hurling is? We saw our minors obviously got a heavy defeat in the minor championship, and the Clare 20s, again, disappointing in their championship.
Yeah, I guess the under-20s, I suppose you'd have to put an asterisk beside it. They were missing, a couple of key players, and lost Mark Rogers to the senior setup in a kind of a crazy rule, I think. But the minors obviously was a worrying defeat. But look, there is a lot of very good work going on there at development squads, and I see it myself there firsthand. There is a lot of good work going on, a lot of very good work going on at club level. You don't have to be necessarily successful at underage. Is once you're developing players. You look at some of the players that came through in the last couple of years. Ryan Taylor, these guys, they wouldn't have won anything at underage. Okay, it's worrying to get bad beatings. That's without question. But I think that was an exceptional Cork team as well. And if you go back to the last really successful Clare team at underage, was that 21 team that won 3 in a row. That was an exceptional bunch that came together. And that happens in a county like Clare once in a blue moon as such. So once you keep developing players, it's a bit like a senior team in a club. A lot of the successful club teams around are competing at B and C, but they're picking 1 or 2 players up every year. Aidan McCarthy would be another guy that wouldn't have seen any success with underage for Clare, and he's a star player now. So, if we just keep working with what we have, get the best out of them, try to be a bit more competitive at underage, no doubt. But if we keep developing, get a couple of players off it, and I suppose it's important. To go back to my point, it's very important to keep the guys that are there at the moment, keep them going for another couple of years. Look at the likes of John Conlon, who's played on. He's 30 now, but 31 is he? I can't know exactly what age he is. The likes of Tony Kelly, they're 27, 28. There's a couple of more years in those guys. Keep them at it and keep developing our underage, and not get too many people rushing to blame this one and that one after that minor defeat. That was kind of a freak thing. I know a lot of those players now. I've worked with some of those players myself at club level, and they're really good players, and I wouldn't write them off at all. They may go on to be really good inter-county players. So I think just keep doing what we're doing. It's important now that we'd have a good competitive senior championship, and we will pick up a few players from that, and it'll improve players that are there. And we've had a really good senior championship in the last couple of years. So I wouldn't. While there is a lot of work to be done, we are doing a lot of work and we're doing a lot of right things, and it's important to be pulled together, being positive. And I think, and I repeat myself again, there is a pool of players in West Clare that if they could be brought in some way into the club scene, whether it's their own club or playing with other clubs, we need to widen the net as much as we can and put all these side shows to one side and move together in a positive way. People are tired of this side shows now, and they're being people, with their own agenda. Park that and move on to a more positive place.
Repeating yourself just to make sure Colm Collins gets wind of that we snap off the footballers for the hurlers. But lads, I suppose
we'll give them a few as well.
I suppose just before we finish, lads, Clare exited in the qualifier stage, but in terms of the seniors, looking at the lads that are still available and possibly to come back next year, the mood overall towards Clare is positive, of course, towards Clare senior hurling.
Yeah, it certainly is. It has to be, and it's to get the players who weren't there this year for whatever reason. Hopefully Shane O'Donnell will recover. We had a few tough injuries this year, like Aaron Fitzgerald had a tough year injury-wise. I think it's important to look at the likes of Shane O'Morey. I think he'd have been a big asset had he been there. These fellas are needed, and we're not in a position that we can kind of, if somebody for whatever reason says they're not going playing or they're not available, that we can just forget about them. I think Fergal touched on it earlier. You have to make it attractive. You have to try and have everybody there. Now, unfortunately, I think the pandemic was part of the problem over the last couple of years. Like Peter Duggan may have been home a lot earlier had we not had a pandemic and had we not had restrictions on travel and lockdowns, etc. He was a massive loss. You need everybody. You need all these players. We can't afford to be without anybody. And I think we have to, as Fergal said there, you have to try and make it such that you will keep everybody relatively home-based, so that they can be available to your county setup and available to your squad for training. And that's very important going forward. And hopefully that will be the case in the coming year.
And Fergal, to possibly put you on the spot, we had 4 All-Star nominees last year: Eibhear Quilligan, Rory Hayes, Cathal Malone, Tony Kelly. Do you expect we'd get 4 again, or would the same 4, or maybe new additions?
Yeah, hopefully we will. I suppose the danger with that is we're out at a relatively early stage in the championship, and as we know, the longer teams stay in it, the more exposure they get with media and this and that. But I think Rory Hayes again would be a shoe-in for me in terms of getting a nomination, and there isn't too many better cornerbacks in the business than him. I thought Paul Flanagan had an exceptional year. Again, was out in the cold for a long number of years, and Brian Lohan, put a lot of faith in him, and he played really well. Conor Cleary was another one I thought had a great year. Tony Kelly, obviously, huge year as well. Again, in line for Hurler of the Year, in my opinion. Cathal Malone, the work rate of this guy is phenomenal. For me, he'd be would be nominated as well. And I think Ryan Taylor, well, he might have had as good a game on Saturday, not for a lack of effort, but he had an extremely good year as well. We're unlikely to get all of them, but I think definitely Hayes, Flanagan, Kelly, Malone, for me, it'd be if we were looking for 4 again, I think they'd be the 4 that I would hope would be nominated.
So we'll wait and see if Fergal's prediction comes true on that one. But on that note, many thanks once again to Fergal for joining us for great analysis, and to Seamus Hayes, who made his debut and a great debut as well with their Zoom analysis. So many thanks to the 2 boys, and many thanks to everyone who's tuned in over the last few weeks for our Zoom video specials. And we'll count down the days until Championship is back for 2022. Until then, mind yourselves and take care.